Elena, you really let your daughter nap here? In this lobby? Arthur Cross's voice cracked like a whip across the glass and marble expanse. He didn't lower his tone. In fact, he projected it, loud enough to echo between the floor-to-ceiling screens and security cameras. She's not a puppy. This isn't a janitor's break room. She didn't flinch. Not when his eyes scanned her cart. Not even when he pointed, mockingly, at the dusty, stuffed cat her daughter had clutched like armor. "Your lobby doesn't seem to mind," she said. "And neither did your cameras until you showed up." The silence that followed wasn't confused. It was tense, like something had cracked that shouldn't have. Subscribe if you've ever watched someone powerful get too comfortable yelling at the wrong woman. Arthur turned red, but only for a second. Then his usual sneer returned. "You're paid to clean floors, not decorate them with sleeping children." She exhaled slowly, calm, measured. "And yet here you are, still standing on a floor I cleaned well enough to see your reflection." She wasn't angry, not on the outside, just focused, her voice smooth like waxed linoleum. But inside, something ancient shifted, because he didn't remember her. Not yet. And that was going to be the reason he lost everything. When she applied for the janitorial position, she'd used her mother's last name. Different ID, clean slate. It wasn't revenge she wanted. It was space, safety, peace. But peace had its conditions. And Arthur Cross just violated all of them. The humming of the floor polisher didn't cover the embarrassment on her daughter's face. Lila sat up from the far corner of the lobby, rubbing her eyes, hair flattened on one side. She was only 7, but she understood shame. Understood when someone saw her as less. The janitor pushed her cart forward, wordless, and extended a hand. Lila took it without hesitation. The stuffed cat dangled from her other hand like a truce flag no one wanted. "Come on, baby," she whispered. "Let's get back to the service hallway." Arthur watched them leave without apology, and she didn't ask for one. The night shift was quieter, just the way she liked it. No briefcases swinging past her mop handle, no stilettos tracking freshly dried tiles, just the hum of systems. Vents cycling, keycards beeping. She designed all of it 15 years ago. Back when this building was just concrete and promises. Back when Crosstech meant they built it together. Her code, his capital. But betrayal didn't always come with gunshots or headlines. Sometimes it came with a reshuffle, a boardroom vote, a name erased from a plaque. Sometimes it came with custody battles and non-competes. Now she wore coveralls. Her badge said Facilities Team, Elena V. And Crosstech's CEO still barked at her like he hadn't once called her irreplaceable. "Mom, can we keep him?" She looked down. Lila had wandered back into the service lobby and stood beside the vending machines, pointing at something, or someone, slumped against the far wall. A man, well-dressed, disheveled, out cold. He looked like he'd fallen from a very expensive sky. Her jaw tightened. "Step back, baby." She knelt beside him and checked for a pulse. Steady, breathing. His cufflink bore the Crosstech emblem, but his face didn't ring a bell. And yet something about the tilt of his jaw, the silver at his temple. She pulled her radio. "This is Facilities Level 2. Found an unconscious male in the South Lobby Junction near VMS. No blood, breathing. Looks like executive tier dispatch crackled. Noted. EMT's en route. Can you stay with him?" The janitor stared again. Her fingers hovered over his collar, then paused. There, faint tattoo behind his ear. S. not Arthur. Sebastian. Arthur's estranged son. Unlisted, unphotographed. Last she'd heard, he'd left the company after a public fight. She stood. "I'll stay." And for the first time in years, she wasn't just cleaning up Crosstech's floors. She was about to clean up its future. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you felt something shift in that last scene, stick around. Arthur Cross picked the wrong janitor to dismiss. The EMTs arrived 12 minutes later, but she was already crouched beside the man with a damp cloth cooling his temple. He hadn't stirred, still breathing, still out cold. The hallway outside the vending machines smelled faintly of burnt coffee and bleach, and she could hear Lila humming to her stuffed cat in the distance. Soft, off-key, safe. When the medics rolled in, they barely gave her a glance. "Who found him?" "I did." One of them nodded, checked vitals, and leaned in to speak into a radio. Still unconscious. No obvious trauma. "ID?" She hesitated, then quietly said, "Sebastian Cross." Both men froze. One looked at her, uncertain. "The CEO's son?" She gave a short nod. "Tattoo behind his ear says S. Cross, and he's wearing executive tier Crosstech cufflinks." They exchanged a glance, and suddenly, the entire tone of the room shifted. "Get him on the stretcher!" Gently, she backed away and let them take over, her hand brushing the floor as she stood. Polished, smooth, familiar. As the gurney rolled past, one of them muttered, "How the hell does a janitor know that?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. 3 hours later, she was scrubbing the marble in the executive lobby when Marla Jennings approached. It was just past midnight, and the office floors above were empty. Only the hum of servers and the faint echo of elevator dings filled the air. "She, right?" Marla asked, arms crossed, tablet clutched to her chest. She didn't stop scrubbing. "Yeah, I heard what happened." With Mr. Cross's son, a pause. "I also heard you identified him before anyone else did." Stood slowly. "Is that a problem?" Marla hesitated. No, it's just impressive." The two women locked eyes for a moment, and for the first time, she noticed something in Marla's face that wasn't condescension. It was curiosity. "I looked through your file tonight," Marla said softly. "It's surprisingly light. No job history before this building. No references, except a one-liner from a closed staffing agency." She didn't blink. "That's the problem with temp agencies. They disappear when you need them." Marla gave a small smile, almost a test. "That, or someone doesn't want to be found." There it was. A tilt in the power dynamic. Subtle. A toe across the line. She picked up her mop. "If I wanted to be found, I wouldn't be working the graveyard shift." But Marla didn't move. "Do you know who built the Crosstech backbone encryption systems? The original servers from the early 2000s? She paused. That question wasn't random. "Some engineering firm out of Houston," she lied. "Funny, because I searched that firm's archive. There's no record of them ever working on Crosstech systems. Then I guess you hit a dead end." Marla's brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't push. Not yet. The next morning, Lila bounced beside her mother as they walked through the back corridor toward the storage room. "Did the man wake up?" "I don't know, baby." "Will he come back?" "He might." "Can we keep him?" She smiled despite herself. "He's not a puppy, sweet pea." But he was sad. I could tell she paused. "What makes you say that?" He had the same look you get when you think I'm not watching. Her heart tugged. The mop in her hand felt heavier. Sometimes, children carried truth without knowing how sharp it could be. In the executive boardroom upstairs, Arthur Cross paced behind the conference table. The lights were dimmed, the screens alive with spreadsheets and failure. "Why wasn't I notified he was even in the building?" he snapped. "No one saw him arrive," a junior exec replied. "In his security clearance was revoked a year ago." Arthur scoffed. "Revoked or not?" Someone should have known. Another voice chimed in, tentative. "Facilities staff found him." The woman. Elena? She ID'd him before the EMTS did. Arthur blinked. The janitor? A moment passed. His mind worked through something, unseen. Pull her file, someone at the table said. Already did. It's incomplete. Run a full check. Cross-reference aliases. Anything connected to systems architecture, R&D, or Eleanor K. Duval. The name hovered. Unspoken, unacknowledged, forgotten, but not deleted. Downstairs, she leaned on her mop and looked at the security camera in the corner of the lobby. Its red light blinked quietly, unaware that it was watching the woman who once told it where to look. Some systems couldn't forget their creators. They could only wait for them to come back. The next night, she returned to work with her hair tied tighter than usual, her badge clipped lower on her shirt. A minor adjustment, but enough to make people look twice before recognizing her. Lila trailed behind, half awake and clinging to her stuffed cat. The building always looked different at night. Emptier, taller, colder. She set her cart near the service elevator and leaned down. You remember the rule, baby? Lila nodded. Stay where you can see me. No running, and don't touch the shiny buttons. A small smile touched her lips. That's my girl. The elevator chimed, and they stepped in together. Floor 3 lit up as the button glowed beneath her fingers. Executive break room access only. The janitor had no business going there. But then again, she'd built the authorization protocol 10 years ago. Sebastian Cross sat stiffly in a chair near the break room window, sipping a glass of water with slow, careful movements. His jacket was gone, shirt wrinkled, eyes still hazy. He looked like a man halfway returned from wherever he'd been. He didn't recognize her. But his eyes lingered longer than they should have for a stranger. Have we met before? He asked. She paused before answering. Not formally. His brow furrowed. You were there when I... Yes. There was silence. Thick, expectant. You knew who I was, he said at last. I did. How? I saw the tattoo behind your ear. The cufflinks helped. He studied her carefully, eyes narrowing, not suspicious, just trying to place her. Do you work in security? She shook her head. IT? Nope. Then how did you know to check behind my ear? She didn't answer. That silence was sharper than anything she could have said. He leaned back slowly, a flicker of intrigue on his face. You're not just a janitor. And before she could deflect, another voice broke in. Mom used to work here before, Lila said from the hallway, hugging her stuffed cat. When I was little. But they were mean to her, so she stopped. The room froze. The girl didn't know what she'd just done, but she'd said it with such certainty, such sweetness, that it hung in the air like a dropped glass. No one rushed to catch. Sebastian stood. Your daughter? Yes. He looked at the girl, then back at her. She's the reason you're here now? She's the reason I'm still breathing. He nodded slowly. That's a good reason. Lila skipped ahead into the break room, completely unaware of the ripple she'd just caused. I think he's sad, she whispered to the cat. We should make him smile more. Sebastian's lips curled faintly. Smart kid. She sees things others don't. I noticed. In the HR wing, Marla Jennings sat at her desk, staring at two open tabs on her screen. One held Elena V's current employee profile. Night janitor, hired 2 years ago. The other was a grainy news article from over a decade ago. Crosstech co-founder Eleanor Duval resigns amid legal dispute. Shares transferred to Arthur Cross. The faces were different. Age, weight, hair color. But the eyes? Identical. And Marla wasn't the only one watching. The system flagged her search and silently pinged upper-tier clearance logs. By the time she closed the tab, A silent alert had already reached Arthur's desk. Upstairs, Arthur Cross stared at the blinking notification. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he reached into the drawer and pulled out a file that had no business still existing. Duval, Eleanor K. old printouts, meeting notes, code sketches, encrypted access layers with initials no one else understood. They'd called her a genius once. Too many had forgotten. He hadn't. That's why he buried her deeper than anyone else. But now someone was pulling her back into the light. And his son, the only wild card he'd never controlled, had met her, trusted her. He tapped his fingers on the mahogany desk. "Not yet," he whispered to no one. Back in the break room, the girl giggled as Sebastian made a clumsy joke about the vending machine stealing his change. She laughed like he'd just performed a full routine. She stayed silent, leaning against the counter, watching both of them. He turned back to her. "So, what did you do here, back when you used to work?" A long pause. Her hand tightened on the edge of the counter. "I fix things." "Like what?" "Whatever broke." Another silence. Sebastian stared at her for a long beat. Then he simply said, "I'd like to talk again." Her eyes flicked to Lila, then to the wall clock. "Then don't disappear this time." He nodded, more serious now. "I won't." As she walked out, her daughter trailing behind, Lila turned and whispered to Sebastian. "She's smarter than you think." He smiled. "I believe you." The walk back to the service hallway felt different. Not because the floor was cleaner or the vents quieter, but because someone, finally, had looked at her without trying to figure out what she was doing there. He'd just accepted her, asked questions like she mattered. Lila skipped ahead, humming a tune only she understood, her stuffed cat flopping against her side like a happy accomplice. When they reached the supply room, she unlocked the metal door and flicked on the overhead light. It buzzed once, then held steady. "Mom?" "Yeah, baby?" "Is he going to be okay now?" She paused. "He might be." "Do you think he has someone who makes him warm milk too?" The janitor smiled, kneeling beside a lower shelf to retrieve gloves. "I don't know, but I think you helped him more than you know." Lila beamed and flopped onto a chair, cradling her cat. "Then I'll save my marshmallows for him next time." Upstairs, Marla sat rigid in the executive elevator, thumb hovering over the floor 42 button, the CEO's suite. She hadn't been called to that floor in 2 years. The ride up felt slower than it should have, as if the building itself didn't want her going there. When the doors opened, Arthur Cross was waiting, alone. She stepped out cautiously, tablet pressed to her chest like a shield. "You've been digging," he said flatly. She didn't pretend. "Yes? Why?" "Because you're either blind or playing stupid." His brow twitched. "Watch yourself." "I did." Her voice was steady. "I watched a woman identify your son before medical did. I watched your own employees whisper her name like she doesn't matter. And then I looked up what you buried." He circled behind his desk and leaned forward. "You think you've discovered something no one else knew?" "I think you're afraid of what happens if someone else does." Arthur's jaw clenched. "She signed away her shares. Her NDA stands." "You can't NDA competence," Marla snapped. "And you sure as hell can't erase someone who built the damn bones of your company?" He stared at her for a long time, measured, unmoving. "Let it go." "I can't," she said, "because your son already hasn't." That landed. He leaned back slowly in his chair. "He doesn't remember." Marla tilted her head. "He's starting to." Down below, the hum of the floor polisher filled the West Wing as the janitor guided it along the marble edges of the hallway. She knew every inch of this building, Every vent that hummed too loud, every wire that sparked if humidity rose above 60%. But it wasn't just maintenance knowledge. She knew it like a musician knew her instrument. Like an architect knew weight and balance without needing blueprints. She'd made this place work, and now it was starting to break in the places only she had ever touched. Later that evening, Sebastian stepped off the elevator with a new clarity in his gait. He looked rested, curious, intent. Instead of heading to his father's office, he turned down a quiet hallway toward the facilities wing. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Sir, this level is—" "I know." He didn't stop, just kept walking until he found the storage corridor she had entered the night before. He knocked once on the metal door before it opened. She stood on the other side, still in uniform, gloved hands mid-clean. "You found me," she said simply. "You didn't leave breadcrumbs." "But your daughter did," she raised a brow. He smiled. "She's smarter than you think." "She gets that from herself." He laughed, and the tension cracked just a little between them. "I asked around," he said. "Looked into archive systems, codebase logs. There are comments in the original Crosstech backbone with the initials EKD, same as your daughter's initials. Coincidence?" Her eyes didn't flicker. "You tell me." Sebastian leaned against the door frame. "You were Eleanor Duval." She said nothing. "That's why you knew who I was." Still silence. "You left. Or were forced out at that." Her voice returned, calm, icy. "Let's just say, some legacies get renamed when one partner gets greedy. And now?" She looked him dead in the eye. "Now I mop the floor outside the boardroom I built and make sure my daughter never has to beg for space to sleep." That hit. Sebastian stepped back. "I want to hear everything." "Then ask your father why he erased me." And with that, she shut the door gently in his face. He stood in the hallway for a long time. Not angry, not insulted, just quiet, because the pieces were falling into place. And one of them looked a lot like a woman the company once forgot, who just might be the only one who could save it now. "Mom doesn't like elevators that talk," Lila said as she cradled her stuffed cat in the security booth. The guard blinked. "They don't talk," Lila giggled. "Not to you." She reached up and pressed her small hand against the terminal beside the chair. It beeped once. An old legacy response that hadn't worked in years, until now. The screen flashed for just a second. A string of letters. Voice protocol EKDX. Manual override available. The guard sat upright. "Wait, what did you just do?" Lila tilted her head. "Nothing. Mommy says that screen's just grumpy. You have to talk nice to it." Then she skipped off down the hallway. The man stared at the terminal, suddenly aware that something old and possibly dangerous had just come back to life. Marla was in the data room, skimming encrypted backups when the ping came through. She opened the alert and stared. Unauthorized ping on dormant EKDX protocol node. Source: Lobby Booth Terminal A. She whispered the letters out loud. EKDX. Eleanor K. Duval. Her hand hovered over the enter key. And then she did something she hadn't done since starting at Crosstech. She printed the record. On paper. Arthur was already waiting when Sebastian entered the boardroom. "You're late," the CEO said without looking up. Sebastian dropped a folder on the table. "Not anymore." Arthur flipped it open, scanned the data. Legacy logs, boot history, access markers. "This is from the original backbone system." Sebastian nodded. "Your janitor's daughter activated it." A pause. Arthur's jaw flexed. "You spoke to her again." "Yes. And I want the truth this time." No boardroom stories, no legal smokescreens, Arthur stood. "You're being emotional." "I'm being strategic." Arthur snapped the folder shut. "You don't know what she did." Sebastian stepped forward. No, you don't want me to know what you did. The tension broke when Marla entered without knocking, holding the printed log. I think you both should see this, she said, voice tighter than usual. She dropped the sheet in front of them. The ink was still warm. Arthur stared at it, blood draining from his face. Sebastian scanned it. EKDX voice protocol? That's from the infrastructure testing suite. It wasn't even supposed to be public. Marla nodded. Correct. And it was last accessed tonight. By a child, Arthur gritted his teeth. That system was supposed to be wiped after her departure. Marla folded her arms. Looks like the system remembers her better than you do. Downstairs, the janitor loaded her supply cart with steady hands. But her mind raced. She hadn't touched that terminal in years, not since installing the fail-safe under cover of night, when the boardroom coup had already been set in motion. The voice protocol was hers, a ghost in the system. A backup key not even Arthur had known existed. And now her daughter had triggered it. Accidentally, innocently, like lighting a match in a locked room filled with gas. Sebastian followed Marla into the elevator, silent as the numbers ticked down. She's not going to tell you everything, Marla said quietly. I don't expect her to. Then why do you keep showing up? He shrugged. Because someone has to believe her before the system crashes. Marla studied him for a long moment. You're not your father. I never wanted to be. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the ground floor. Lila sat in the supply closet, legs swinging, singing a tune she'd made up on the spot. She's got a mop, she's got a code, she made the floor, she cracked the mode. Her voice echoed faintly, bouncing off cinder block and bleach. The woman standing behind her paused mid-stack of towels. How do you know that song, baby? Lila shrugged. It's just a silly rhyme. But the words weren't silly. They were system terms, old phrases, dev mode lyrics that no child should know, unless she'd heard them from someone who used to live inside the machines. Her mother stared at her, and for the first time in a long time, felt the fragile strands of anonymity start to slip. Outside the door, Sebastian waited. He didn't knock, just stood there, listening to the sound of a child singing systems architecture like a lullaby. And the echo of his father's empire, built on stolen brilliance, began to crack. The next morning, a quiet pulse echoed through Crosstech's network, one that only legacy systems could feel. It was a ping, a soft handshake from a dormant protocol. In the server room on level B3, a technician blinked at his monitor. System EKDX. What the hell? He tried to trace the source. The screen flickered, denied. Whatever this was, it didn't want to be found. Which meant someone, something, still had access. He picked up the phone. Arthur Cross stood in his office, jaw locked as he scrolled through the IT report on his tablet. EKDX had reactivated twice in 24 hours. Unauthorized, unreplicated, traced to 2 physical locations in the building. 1, Terminal A in the lobby. 2, a janitor's closet. He slammed the tablet down and buzzed security. Find Elena V. I want her in my office today. No excuses. In the break room, Sebastian sat across from Marla, eyes still on the log she'd printed the night before. She created a back door. Marla nodded. Looks that way. Why? To protect something. Or to have a way back, and Sebastian leaned forward. But she didn't use it. Her daughter did. Marla folded her arms. And that's why it matters. Because the systems remember who made them, even when the company doesn't. Down in the hallway, Elena rinsed out a mop with slow, careful movements. She felt it. That thrum under her skin. The building was waking up, not in the usual way, not fluorescent lights or power cycles, but in the way a place remembers who touched it last. The system ping wasn't a breach. It was a heartbeat, and now people were hearing it. The security officer assigned to retrieve her hesitated when he found her. He didn't know why. She didn't look threatening. She was wearing gloves and held a bucket. But when she turned, her eyes locked on his, like she already knew what message he was about to deliver. "Arthur wants to see you." She dried her hands calmly. "Of course he does." Lila peeked out from behind the mop cart. "Do I come too?" "No, baby," she said softly. "You stay here." "Guard the cat." The girl saluted with a giggle. The elevator ride was silent. No music. Just her reflection staring back in the polished doors. She remembered when those elevators used to speak. She'd programmed the voice herself. It sounded like her sister. She'd used her voice pattern to test the speech module, never thinking the feature would be stripped and silenced. Like her, Arthur stood when she entered, not out of respect, out of control. "I suppose you know why you're here. I imagine it's about the system you don't understand, pinging in ways you can't trace, triggered by a 7-year-old humming a bedtime song." He didn't respond. She walked further into the room. "You didn't erase me, Arthur. You just painted over me? And now the paint's peeling." His hand clenched on the desk. "You broke your NDA." "No," she said. "I've kept every word. I haven't told a soul. Your systems are the ones doing the talking." He moved closer, voice tight. "Deactivate EKDX." She tilted her head. "You think I still have control? Don't play with me. I'm not. But maybe you should ask why a legacy framework that's been buried for a decade still remembers my name and doesn't recognize yours." That silenced him. Outside the office, Sebastian stood just beyond the frosted glass door. He couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. He could feel the power dynamic shifting. Inside that room, the past was clawing its way into the present, and, this time, his father wasn't the one in charge. Back downstairs, Lila sat in the hallway, coloring with her stuffed cat beside her. Another staffer passed, paused, and smiled. "Hey, kiddo. What's your mom do again?" "She fixes things," Lila said proudly. "Like what?" "Everything." The staffer chuckled and kept walking, but the words lingered. The way she said it, like it was a fact, not a brag, like it had always been true. And maybe it had. In the control room, a silent war was playing out. Legacy nodes were flickering online. Firewall permissions were rewriting themselves. At the center of it all, the original seed signature, EKD0421, was propagating silently through the oldest files. She hadn't activated the system, but the system had recognized its creator, and it was listening. The building ran differently that night. Not louder, not faster, just aware. Elena felt it in the way the lights timed their flickers, in the staggered hum of the elevators, in the way the backup generators ran 10 seconds too early. It wasn't error. It was pattern recognition. The system she'd once built was adjusting. To her presence, in the server control center on B3, a red notice appeared on the wall monitor. Legacy error. Override token accepted. User. EKD0421. Welcome back. The technician on duty stared at it. He'd never seen that screen before. No one on his team even knew what EKD meant. He pinged IT security. But before the message went through, the screen blinked and vanished. Marla was still in the HR archive room when the call came through. She answered quietly. "Jennings." The voice on the other end trembled. "We just got an EKD override on the root servers." Her heart froze. "You're sure?" "Yes." For 5 seconds. Then it vanished, like it knew we saw it. Marla hung up and closed her eyes. The building wasn't just haunted by Elena Duval. It was beginning to obey her again, Elena stood at the far edge of the mechanical floor, her hands gloved, clipboard tucked under one arm. Technically, she was performing duct inspection. In reality, she was listening, counting server fans, watching latency. The new engineers didn't realize the internal cooling systems were layered wrong, that the compressor speeds would trigger a thermal cascade in the wrong weather pattern. But she did, because she designed it to respond to environmental stress triggers. It was a self-correcting system until someone rewired it for cost cutting. She tapped a small access panel hidden behind a loose vent, entered a diagnostic code, and waited. A second later, the system purred. The glitch vanished, and somewhere in the Crosstech emergency failure queue, a blinking warning light stopped blinking. No one would know she fixed it, not yet. But someone would notice it had been fixed. Sebastian watched the boardroom screen refresh again. 3 anomalies resolved? He asked, confused. The tech guy nodded. We didn't touch those. We were prepping the patch, and then the failure logs just cleared themselves. Any sign of infiltration? No external pings. No malware. Just stopped. Sebastian leaned back. It wasn't sabotage. It was a signature. Downstairs, Elena returned to the janitor's closet and found Lila asleep in the corner, curled up with her cat and a coloring book. The crayons were scattered around her like little broken truths. She brushed her daughter's hair back and pulled the small blanket over her legs. For a long moment, she just sat there. This building used to mean ownership, innovation, a future she built from nothing but a whiteboard, an idea, and a man who once called her partner. Now it meant shelter, survival. But that was starting to shift. And she wasn't just cleaning floors anymore. She was clearing the way. In the elevator, Marla stood with a tablet full of redacted personnel files. She checked 3 different databases. Elena V. didn't exist in any of them until 2 years ago. But Eleanor K. Duvall? She existed everywhere before she vanished. Meeting minutes, patent co-signatures, conference footage. Her face scrubbed from internal records. Her name cut from legal filings. Only one thing remained untouched, the code base. And now the code was writing back. Back at his desk, Arthur stared at his screen in silence. The override hadn't returned since this morning, but the system had stopped failing. That was more alarming than if it had crashed, because it meant someone was correcting it in real time. Not patching, not escalating, fixing. He opened a secondary window and pulled up his security clearance log. There it was, EKD 0421. He hadn't seen that tag in over a decade, and it was back. In the janitor's closet, the mother sat quietly beside her sleeping daughter. Not plotting, not scheming, just remembering. The time she and Arthur sketched a neural load balancer on a napkin. The late-night coding sprints. The shared victories, and the moment he pulled her name from the project that bore her DNA. She didn't want her old job back. She didn't want her name on the wall. But she wanted her daughter to know. That legacy can't be stolen forever, especially not when the system still remembers who programmed its heart. By the time most of the building arrived for the morning shift, the server hiccups had mysteriously stopped. No tech briefings, no emails, no official announcements. But across the top floor, things were working again. Marla leaned against the edge of her desk, scrolling through logs that didn't match the timelines. 3 resolved memory collapses, and no user-tagged activity. She tapped her screen again. Nothing. No errors, no footprints. Just one ghost tag embedded in the silent recovery. EKD 0421. Override assumed. Down on level 2, Elena wiped down the security desk without being asked. Her badge flicked lightly against her hip as she leaned over. The counter? The same terminal Lila had accidentally activated still glowed faintly, even though it should have been locked down. The guard stood awkwardly behind her. You don't have clearance to touch that panel. I'm not touching it, she said evenly. I'm just cleaning around it. Still, the cursor blinked faster when she got close, recognizing her, waiting for her. The guard scratched his neck. Is it supposed to do that? She glanced at the screen. Only if it remembers you. Before he could respond, she tapped the screen once with her cloth. The blinking stopped. Later that evening, Sebastian paced in front of the vending machines, unsure if he was early or if she'd decided not to show. But when the supply room door opened, it wasn't Elena who stepped out first. It was Lila. She grinned and held up a folded napkin. We brought snacks this time. He blinked. You did? She nodded solemnly. But no coffee. Mom says you look like a decaf, kind of sad. Before he could answer, the janitor emerged behind her, tying her hair back with a small elastic band. She carried no mop, no gloves, just a worn notebook under one arm and eyes that no longer avoided his. He gave a small nod. I saw the logs. The ones no one's supposed to see. I figured you would. I think my father already knows. I'm counting on it. She said it so simply, like naming the weather. He took a breath. Are you planning something? I'm preparing something. A pause. He looked at her, the way a man looks at blueprints he thought were lost. What do you need? They sat at a small corner table in the back hallway, beside an inactive maintenance console. The old system's hub she'd designed, buried beneath a stairwell nobody used anymore. I need quiet access, she said, in 5 minutes without your father noticing. Sebastian nodded. I can distract him. You'll need to make him angry. That's not hard. She opened the notebook. Inside were hand-drawn schematics, network skeletons, coded line structures, written in a shorthand only 2 people had ever used. He leaned in slowly, brows furrowing. You rebuilt the core loop? She nodded. It's leaner now. The autofix protocols don't require escalation trees. The system corrects based on environmental mapping, which means every time a new hire takes 2 weeks to diagnose a failure, the system will have already solved it and logged their incompetence by name. He sat back, stunned. That's brutal. That's accountability. He looked at her with something between awe and regret. You really could have stayed invisible, you know. Just coasted. She closed the notebook. I didn't come back to coast. While they talked, Lila sat cross-legged nearby, drawing circuits in crayon. She's got the same eyes you do, Sebastian said. She's got more than that, the woman replied. She's got no idea what it means to be erased. He understood now. Why she didn't just walk away. Why she didn't file lawsuits or seek press coverage. This wasn't about revenge. It was about legacy. That night, Elena stayed late. Later than usual. She entered the stairwell beneath the executive wing, key-carding into a forgotten maintenance alcove. The panel was still there, dust-covered but untouched. Behind it, the terminal that once controlled the system's rollback architecture. One of only 2 ever built. The second had been destroyed when she left. She typed in the old command key, /ekd.remote_LOAD.ACTIVATE. The screen blinked once, then welcomed her back. The override accepted. She didn't make noise. She didn't leave a mark. She just restored a heartbeat that had always been hers. And this time, she wouldn't leave it behind. The first system-wide anomaly appeared at 6:42 a.m. It wasn't a crash. It wasn't even an alert. It was a reordering. Every server log across Crosstech's central data grid auto-sorted based on efficiency, not rank, not clearance, Junior engineers were bumped below maintenance reports. Security updates were pushed beneath diagnostic cleanups. And at the very top of the pipeline, a patch protocol marked EKD, Adaptive Framework Reinstated. Auth, Legacy Core. Marla dropped her coffee. The spill didn't matter. The screen in front of her did. She clicked into the protocol and stared. Adaptive Reinstated? That framework was deprecated 12 years ago. Deprecated, but never deleted. She opened the system log. The override hadn't been triggered by Crosstech's engineers. It had been accepted by the system itself. Sebastian burst into the control room. Is it real? The tech team was in chaos. Screens blinked. Priorities shuffled. Load-bearing scripts were rewriting without human input. Where's it coming from? He asked. One of the junior techs turned. That's the thing. It's not coming from anywhere. It's responding to something Sebastian scanned the logs. There it was again. EKD 0421. Local route detected. Admin override. Passive mode enabled. He exhaled slowly. She's not attacking the system. No, the technician said. She is the system. Arthur slammed his palm against the glass conference table. Who approved this rollback? The execs surrounding him blinked, then shook their heads. Sir, someone said cautiously, there was no rollback request. The system performed a legacy self-correction. Systems don't self-correct across secured sectors. Apparently, this one does. Arthur's face turned the color of the marble floor. Then someone built it wrong? Sebastian stepped in from the doorway. Or someone built it right, and we just buried her. Arthur froze. You're not supposed to be here. I've been here the whole time. In the maintenance stairwell, she returned to the access terminal, this time with a purpose. She wasn't hiding now. She was directing. From her pocket, she pulled a narrow flashband, nearly invisible except for the light humming down its length. She inserted it into the terminal, then typed a single string, /EKD.surface:, selective proof enabled. The building responded immediately. Not with sound, with sequence. Every executive terminal flashed. Each floor-to-floor data feed began populating with timestamps, ones that didn't match any employee's input. Just one digital fingerprint, echoing across the entire system. At her desk, Marla received the first ping, a private message labeled, "Verify this." Attached were logs, thousands of lines of code, all tagged EKD. She traced one to an architectural blueprint stored on a forgotten server, another to an encryption layer Crosstech still used, and another to her own hiring records, which had been flagged for manipulation the year she left. She stood up, heart pounding. "Where are you going?" someone asked. "To fix something that should have never been broken." Sebastian watched the room spin as the framework took over. No one was shouting. No one was even touching the screens, because there was nothing to do. Everything was fixing itself, faster, smarter, more efficiently than any of them ever had. Arthur stood frozen, watching his kingdom recalibrate itself without permission, without him. "You said she signed it all away," Sebastian said quietly. Arthur didn't answer. "You said she was gone." Still silence. Sebastian stepped closer. "You didn't bury her. You built her into the foundation." Arthur turned slowly, voice cold. "Don't romanticize what she was." Sebastian's voice hardened. "I'm not. I'm just finally seeing who she is downstairs." Lila danced in the hallway with her stuffed cat, unaware that her mother was rewriting the legacy of a corporation 4 floors above her. She hummed the tune again, the one she thought she made up, the one that by some strange twist of memory or instinct matched the cadence of her system override key. And in that soft echo, the building hummed with her. She pulled the flashband from the console and tucked it into her sleeve. The process was in motion now. The system would do what it was built to do: elevate efficiency, flag corruption, and prioritize architecture over ego. She didn't have to shout to be heard. She just had to let the code speak for itself. Somewhere above, Arthur Cross stepped back from his desk, watching a frozen interface cycle through old credentials. EKD. Authenticated. His reflection in the monitor was pale, fragile, because the building no longer listened to him. It had remembered her. And it had chosen. The emergency meeting was called for 8 a.m. No subject line, no agenda, just one word in the invite title: stabilization. By 8:05, the executive boardroom was full: CFOs, tech heads, senior legal, and one very pale CEO. Everyone expected a server breach. What they got instead was a system that refused to fail. Latency dropped by 48% overnight, the CTO said, scrolling through system analytics. Manual patches? Asked another. The technician shook his head. No one on staff touched a thing. All corrections happened within the architecture itself. The display screen blinked once, then loaded a command log. At the top, in gray text, command accepted, auth, EKD, local root access verified. Murmurs spread through the room. Is that an engineer? An old dev team? EKD? Someone whispered. Wait, isn't that the co-founder who... Arthur slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. The room went silent, but it was too late. The name had surfaced. Outside the boardroom, Sebastian stood near the wall, arms crossed, watching his father unravel. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, because every person in that room had just seen what his father spent over a decade trying to erase. Not through PR, not through lawsuits, but through silence. And now the silence was cracking. Downstairs, Elena moved through the mechanical level with quiet precision. She didn't need a terminal now. The system had already accepted her override protocols. She was simply guiding them, realigning power flow, reauthorizing fail-safes, disabling redundancies that the modern engineers had stacked like tech jargon trophies. The building moved like breath now, not code, and in that breath, the name they'd buried was coming back to life. Marla burst through the boardroom door. No knock, no warning, just a printed file in her hand. Actual paper. I've confirmed it, she said, cutting across Arthur's voice. The EKD override was activated from maintenance level 4, node junction 7B. She dropped the file on the table. That terminal was designed in 2011, built into the foundation before the final security layers were added. Which means, someone asked. Marla stared at Arthur. It means only one person ever had the clearance to write into that node. She tapped the name printed on the top of the log. Eleanor K. Duval. No one spoke. Then slowly, one of the junior execs glanced at Sebastian. Wait, isn't that the janitor? Sebastian didn't flinch. She never stopped being your architect, he said. She just changed uniforms. Arthur looked like a man watching a house collapse in slow motion. He stood. She has no legal stake, no ownership, no voting rights. But she has functional control, Marla said. The system is prioritizing her input over yours. He turned on her. Because you let it. No, she snapped. Because you thought you could erase the woman who built the bones of this place while keeping her code running underneath it. Her code, another executive echoed softly. That phrase, it stuck like a hammer against glass. At that exact moment, the executive floor lights flickered. Not from failure, but from signal priority realignment. The room dimmed for a second. Then a message loaded on the wall screen. Administrative integrity reinstated. EKD framework active. Welcome back, Eleanor. No sound, no logo, just the system, speaking for itself. And the boardroom, stunned into silence. If you're still watching this unfold, now's your moment. Hit subscribe. The next scene, you'll feel it in your throat. Downstairs, Lila tugged on her mother's sleeve. Is it working? She smiled faintly. It's listening again. Lila beamed. Are you going to tell them who you are now? Her voice softened. They already know. The girl looked up. Even him? She nodded. Especially him. In the boardroom, Arthur moved toward the screen like he could physically erase it, but it was too late. Even if he shut it down, even if he pulled the power, everyone had seen it. The name, the signature, the system's loyalty. And as he reached out to the wall console, the screen changed again. System lock engaged. External override blocked. Only root authority may proceed. And beneath it, blinking quietly. Root authority. EKD. Arthur stepped back like the glass had burned him. For the first time in his empire, he was locked out of something he'd once owned completely. And it hadn't been taken from him. It had simply remembered its creator. The elevator chimed on the executive floor. No badge swipe, no override, just a quiet ding, followed by the soft click of sensible shoes on polished marble. Every head in the boardroom turned as the janitor walked in. Except she wasn't holding a mop. She held nothing. Not fear, not apology, not shame, just herself. And behind her, a silence that pressed like gravity. Arthur Cross's face twisted, but he didn't speak. Because he couldn't. Because the system had already spoken for her. The board watched her approach, like the ghost of a woman they were never supposed to meet. But Sebastian stood and stepped aside, as if she were the one chair had always been waiting for. She stopped just short of the table and looked at the screen, her name still glowing there like a signature in firelight. No one moved. Then she spoke. I won't be staying long. Her voice was calm, quiet, but it cut through the silence like thread through cloth. I'm not here to reclaim shares, or titles, or board votes. Arthur scoffed under his breath, but she didn't look at him. I'm here because the system is sick. Not from sabotage, from neglect. She turned to the board. You built protocols on top of fail-safes, stacked duct tape on glass, rewrote code without understanding its bones. One of the CFOs looked down. Another cleared their throat. You didn't fail because you were stupid, she said. You failed because you were arrogant. And then finally, she looked at Arthur. You failed because you thought you could bury the architect and keep the cathedral. Sebastian folded his arms. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just let it happen. Arthur stepped forward now, voice brittle. This is my company. No, she said softly. This is my design. He tried again. You signed it away. I signed away leverage, she said, not authorship. And the system agreed. Everyone in the room had already seen the override logs. They'd already felt it in the building itself. The way lights synced, servers cooled, elevators stopped humming and started thinking again. This wasn't about a name. This was about what still worked. And everything that worked had one fingerprint on it. EKD. Marla stepped forward, slowly. She held the printed logs, the access pings, the full string of code she had touched into life. She set them gently on the table. No ceremony, just facts. She didn't hack us, Marla said quietly. She healed us. She looked around the room once more. I'm not asking for your gratitude, she said. I'm asking you to stop pretending the foundation doesn't matter. One of the board members spoke. What do you want us to do? She paused. Then, listen to your own system. She walked to the console, typed in a single line of code. The screen responded instantly. /AUTH.AUDIT.MODE.ACTIVE, all legacy structures now visible. Original source tags displayed. Across the boardroom monitors, names vanished. Placeholder authors, redacted updates, assistant-level credit lines, and in their place, E.K. Duval. Over and over and over again. Arthur sank into his chair. The truth hadn't just come out. It had rendered itself. She turned to leave. "You're not staying?" Marla asked. She shook her head. "I have floors to clean." "But you could stay. Rejoin. Led." She looked back once, her eyes cool. "I don't need to be seen to be effective." And with that, she walked out. Not small, not defeated, just finished. Sebastian followed her to the elevator. He said nothing until they reached the doors. Then quietly, "He won't recover from this." She nodded. "That's not my burden." He hesitated. "Will we see you again?" She smiled faintly. "You're standing inside my mind, Sebastian. Every time a light flickers on beat or a server anticipates its load, that's me." He opened his mouth to respond, but she was already inside the elevator. And the doors closed with a chime that felt more like punctuation than goodbye. Downstairs, Lila looked up from her drawing as her mother returned. "Did they remember you?" She knelt beside her. "No," she said gently. "The system remembered me." Lila hugged her cat. "That's better." And she agreed, because some names didn't need to be spoken, not when they were already written into the walls. 2 days later, the janitor's closet was back to normal. Almost. The mop leaned quietly in its usual corner. The cart was stocked, but above the supply hooks, taped with a strip of blue painter's tape, was a sticky note in a child's handwriting. "She fixes everything." She sat on the bench outside the west elevator bank, sipping tea from her thermos while Lila colored beside her. No one interrupted them. Not anymore. When executives passed, they nodded. Not with condescension, but with caution. Because word had spread. The woman in coveralls? She hadn't just fixed the lights or unjammed vending machines. She had restored the building's memory. And now, the building spoke for her. On the 42nd floor, Arthur Cross sat in silence. His office had never felt so still. The digital wall no longer obeyed his voice. The system wouldn't even sync his cloud calendar. IT said the priority matrix had been permanently rebalanced. Root override had locked his credentials below system maintenance. His name was beneath hers, and the building would never let him forget it. In a quiet meeting room, Marla handed a new onboarding manager a badge and packet. "Orientation schedule is in the folder. You'll meet all the team leads, except one." The new hire blinked. "Who's missing?" Marla smiled. "You won't meet her." But if something ever breaks in this building and suddenly fixes itself, the woman leaned in. "Yeah?" Marla's smile widened. "Say thank you, softly. The walls are listening." At 8:14 p.m., Sebastian Cross posted a public update on the CrossTech internal forum. "We measure people by titles, suits, parking spaces, but the real architecture of any system is built in silence. This company still runs because someone chose to design with vision, not ego. Her name is Eleanor K. Duval, and you owe her more than applause. You owe her integrity." The post went viral inside the building in less than 30 minutes. Outside the building, it reached places Arthur could no longer control. That night, Elena and Lila sat on the rooftop under a blanket, looking at stars above the concrete spine of the city. The air hummed. Cooling units thrummed in rhythm. The building pulsed beneath them. Not loud, not glitching, just alive, like something finally breathing in its correct pattern. Lila leaned against her mother's shoulder. "Does it remember me too?" She smiled. You're part of it now. You unlocked the first gate. Do I get a badge? She chuckled. You get bedtime and marshmallows. Deal? Lila yawned. Deal. She carried her daughter back down the stairwell, not the elevator. Some things deserve the slow way down, the quiet, grounded path. Each step echoed like a memory settling. She paused once near the old access terminal. It blinked softly, awaiting new input. She placed her hand gently on the wall, not to type, but to feel. Not ownership, not recognition, just return. Down in the lobby, one of the receptionists noticed her and waved. Evening, Ms. Dove. She caught herself. Elena, the woman nodded. Just Elena. But the receptionist stood straighter all the same, because some people change their posture just by walking into a room. She left the building at 9 p.m. No fanfare, no cameras, just the night air and her daughter's soft breathing. At the corner, a delivery driver held the door for her. You work up there? He asked, nodding at the Crosstech Tower. She paused, then smiled. Something like that. Somewhere behind them, the system hummed. Not from error, from alignment. It no longer needed her presence to know who she was. It simply remembered. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. The lawyer called me a nuisance. So I took the case myself and shut down his entire firm. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?